The Zephyrian Empire stood at the pinnacle of galactic power, an empire built on intellect, precision, and an unyielding belief in their superiority. Their technologies were unmatched, their strategies flawless, and their hunger for control unrelenting. When they turned their eyes on humanity, they already knew the outcome. They had seen it countless times before, species after species crushed under the weight of their superior military force. Humanity, however, had put up a fight. For a brief moment, it seemed like humanity might just be different. For 18 cycles, they resisted, throwing everything they had at the invaders. The Zephyrian fleet, with its deadly precision and overwhelming power, was challenged in ways no other species had dared to do before. But in the end, it was inevitable. The human resistance, though fierce and determined, was outmatched. The Zephyrian Empire was efficient, and humanity's chaotic, emotional tactics proved no match for their calculated strategies. It was over. And yet, as the final human fleets were decimated and the last resistance bases fell silent, there was one final surprise that the Zephyrians had not anticipated: the complete and total collapse of humanity's organized resistance. It happened too quickly, too decisively. Commander Vex Talon stood on the gleaming observation deck of his flagship, Dominator Prime, looking out at the vast stretches of space before him. His 4 eyes glowed with satisfaction as the stars blinked back at him, silent witnesses to his empire's complete triumph. The war against humanity was over. The human worlds had fallen. Their colonies were occupied. The last remnants of their fleet had been wiped out in a spectacular show of superior Zephyrian firepower. Vex felt the weight of victory heavy upon him. The galaxy was safe now, under the strict order of the Zephyrian Empire. "Victory," he muttered to himself, almost to see if he could believe it. From behind him, a voice broke through his reverie. "Commander," Lieutenant Brix Corin said with that bounce in his step, the bounce that came only from crushing an inferior species. He approached, his presence the very embodiment of smug confidence. "The victory statistics are in from High Command. Humanity's last stand collapsed after only 18 standard cycles, sir. Their fleet destroyed, their colonies occupied, their leaders captured or eliminated." Vex turned slowly, his scaled hide shimmering with pride. His eyes narrowed, almost glowing in the low light of the observation deck. 18 cycles, he mused, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "I honestly thought those primitive mammals might last at least 20. He chuckled darkly, claws tapping against the glass viewport. "Shows what happens when you overestimate the opposition, doesn't it, Lieutenant?" Brix gave a knowing smirk. "Indeed, sir. The human resistance proved to be exactly what our tactical computers predicted. Predictable, emotional, and utterly outmatched by superior Zephyrian intellect and technology." Vex's smile widened as he felt the weight of his victory. "That's the thing with humans," he said, turning back to the view. "They're chaotic, emotional. They couldn't keep up with the precision and order we've established across the galaxy." He spread his arms wide, embracing the enormity of his victory. "Truly, the galaxy is safer now that these chaotic creatures have been properly managed." Around them, a celebration unfolded in the vast halls of the Dominator Prime. Officers from 12 different species mingled, raising their various appendages in toast to the swift, decisive victory. Holographic displays on the walls showed conquered human worlds, now flying the crisp, efficient banners of the Empire. Each image was a testament to the complete Zephyrian victory over the human race. Vex allowed himself a moment of peace, basking in the triumph. As he watched the revelry around him, General Thick Vaughn, commander of the 3rd Fleet, approached with a wide, reptilian grin on his face. "Vex," he said, his tone a deep rumble, "my congratulations on your sector's performance. The humans in the Sol system folded faster than a collapsing star." "Thank you, General," Vex replied with mock humility, though his pride was evident in every word. "Though I must say it hardly required strategic brilliance. Point our ships at their pathetic vessels, fire superior weapons, collect the debris. Even a first-cycle cadet could have managed it." Vaughn laughed, his voice booming through the room. "Indeed, their so-called human ingenuity proved to be nothing more than desperate flailing." Vex chuckled in return, a cold, mechanical sound that his species found particularly amusing. "Did you hear about their final stand at Luna Base?" he asked, eyes gleaming. "They actually tried to ram our dreadnoughts with cargo ships." Brix smirked. "Cargo ships," he repeated, his voice tinged with contempt. "Primitive mammals to the very end." Vex nodded, his expression one of mock sadness. That's exactly what I mean. No tactical sophistication, no understanding of proper warfare, just emotional outbursts and suicide charges. Really, it's almost sad how outclassed they were. The laughter continued, filling the space around them. Holographic images cycled through displays, showing the captured human cities, the defeated resistance leaders, the ceremonial raising of Zephyrian flags across Earth's major continents. Each image felt like a punctuation mark on a job well done. As the laughter and celebration echoed through the halls, an aide from the intelligence division approached, a data pad in hand. "Sir," the aide said, his voice low, "final reports confirm 0 remaining human military assets anywhere in known space. Their resistance networks have been completely dismantled. All human worlds are now under proper Imperial administration." Vex raised an eyebrow. "0 remaining assets," he repeated with a satisfied grin. "0, the aide confirmed. No more chaotic human expansion, no more unpredictable human behavior disrupting galactic order. The universe is finally running as efficiently as it should." Vex raised his ceremonial goblet filled with the finest Andromeden wine. "Let this victory serve as a reminder to all species," he announced, his voice commanding. "The Zephyrian Empire brings order, stability, and proper management to the galaxy. No more human chaos, no more human unpredictability, no more humans." The assembled officers burst into applause, their various forms of laughter creating a symphony of triumph that echoed throughout the Dominator Prime's vast corridors. As the celebration continued, none of them could anticipate the storm that was coming. They had defeated humanity. They had brought it to its knees, or so they thought. In the shadows of the Empire's victory, one human, a soldier, a relic, was waking up, and he was about to show them that the fight was far from over. 3 cycles had passed since the fall of humanity, and the galaxy had been plunged into the relative calm of Zephyrian control. From the outer rim to the core, all human territories were under strict Imperial governance. The victory celebrations had died down, and now the Zephyrian Empire was focusing on the delicate task of ensuring that the conquered world stayed compliant. But as always, in the quiet corners of the Empire, there was the potential for unrest, and no one knew this better than Lieutenant Crix Molden. Crix had been assigned to catalog abandoned human military installations across Earth. It was a task that suited him perfectly, methodical, predictable, and entirely beneath the notice of higher-ranking officers. He had no interest in grand strategies or battles. His job was to report on the remnants of a defeated species. It was a simple, straightforward duty. Yet, while inspecting the desolate facilities of a former military base, Crix stumbled upon something far more interesting than a crumbling fortress or old weapons caches. He found the cryogenic chamber. The base was buried deep underground, long abandoned but still functional, its systems whirring with the low hum of power. Dust settled thickly on every surface, and the faint scent of stale air filled the corridors. Everything in the base had been locked away, a time capsule to humanity's defeat. Crix was about to turn and leave when something caught his eye. At the far end of the facility, hidden behind a wall, a faint, steady hum seemed to pulse through the air. Curious, Crix approached and, using his Zephyrian override key, accessed a hidden door. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a large cryogenic pod. For a moment he stood there, unsure of what he was seeing. This wasn't just any military storage. This pod was active, still functioning despite the centuries of neglect. His claws clicked against the metal floor as he approached, examining the control panel. A name was etched into the pod's interface: Morrison Jake, Staff Sergeant. The status read, "Deep Cryogenic Suspension, Operation Last Stand." "Staff Sergeant Morrison," Crix muttered to himself, his antennae twitching in curiosity. The name rang a bell. Last Stand. A final human soldier preserved, forgotten in a deep vault. A strange sensation tickled the back of Crix's mind, a flicker of intrigue that overshadowed the usual arrogance he felt when dealing with humans. He had heard of this particular soldier, but nothing more, just a name on a report. He accessed the pod's data and confirmed the identity. A human soldier, preserved in cryostasis since the last days of the war. Crix's mind raced with possibilities. What was so special about this one? With an almost casual click, Crix initiated the wake-up protocol, watching as the pod slowly hissed open. The freezing air poured out in a puff of vapor. Jake Morrison's body, frozen in time for nearly 2 decades, stirred for the first time in cycles. Crix backed away. eyes wide with a mix of disdain and curiosity, waiting for the inevitable moment when Morrison would awaken. The human blinked slowly, as though not entirely certain he was alive. His eyes, though blurry, darted around the chamber, assessing, calculating, as if instinctively reacting to an unknown threat. His military training kicked in immediately. "Where am I?" Morrison's voice was hoarse, raw, but laced with an unmistakable authority. He glanced at Crix, then at his surroundings. The realization hit. What happened to Earth? Crix stood there, his arms crossed in front of him. "You were left behind," he replied coldly. "The war against your species was finished. The Zephyrian Empire won." Morrison didn't flinch. Instead, he took a deep breath and stood up, testing his limbs, feeling the strange tightness in his body. "So, I'm not dead." Crix sneered, his tone dripping with superiority. "It seems not." For a long moment, Morrison simply stood there, taking in the words, the room, the silence that filled the abandoned base. His mind raced to catch up, but his instincts didn't need much time to read the situation. He was alone. The war was over. Humanity had lost. But something inside him refused to accept that conclusion. "So what now?" Morrison asked, his voice low, almost thoughtful. "Am I supposed to just sit here and be your prisoner?" Crix looked him over, amused by the human's defiance. "You're no prisoner, you're a relic, a curiosity, really, an anomaly left behind after your species was eradicated." Morrison stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were calculating. "I'm not a relic," he muttered under his breath. "I'm a survivor." Jake Morrison knew that the Zephyrians had won. The war had been brutal, and humanity had fought with everything it had. But there was something about the Zephyrians' victory that didn't sit right with him. He wasn't foolish enough to believe they hadn't earned their dominance in combat. But there was more to warfare than just brute force. He'd been in the military long enough to know that in every conflict, the true battle didn't lie in the weapons or the strategy alone. It was in the systems, in the structure that held everything together. And that's where humanity had always excelled, in innovation. The Zephyrians were methodical, precise, cold. They saw themselves as superior because they had no room for unpredictability. Everything had to follow an order, an equation that could always be solved. But that's where they failed to see humanity's greatest strength, adaptability. As Crix continued to gloat, Morrison's mind was already working, assessing the situation. "Where are we going?" Jake asked, suddenly, his voice sharp. "Lieutenant Crix, right." The Zephyrian stiffened. "Yes, that's correct." Morrison grinned. "You're the one who's going to help me." Crix raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "Help you? You're a prisoner, human. You'll do as you're told." Morrison chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I don't think you understand. I'm not asking you for permission, Lieutenant. I'm asking you for access. You have all the systems here. I need them." Crix, still unaware of Morrison's true intentions, crossed his arms. "You want to access our systems? To do what exactly? Your species is defeated." Morrison leaned in slightly, his expression changing from defiance to something more dangerous, calm. "Not for long, you see, Crix. The war isn't over. I just woke up, and the first thing I'm going to do is prove to you why humans never die, why we always find a way." Crix laughed at this human arrogance, but as the seconds ticked by, something strange began to happen. Morrison wasn't acting like a man beaten down by decades of war. He wasn't acting like a prisoner at all. In fact, the more Crix observed him, the more he realized that the human wasn't simply surviving. He was plotting. "What are you going to do?" Crix asked, his voice cautious now. Morrison met his gaze. "I'm going to change the game." Jake Morrison wasn't about to let the Zephyrians think they had won. He had woken up, yes, but he wasn't simply going to roll over and accept the fate the Zephyrians had planned for humanity. The Empire had crushed humanity's military, destroyed their fleets, wiped out their leaders. But in doing so, they had overlooked the one thing that had made humans dangerous in the first place, their ability to adapt. Crix, still believing that the human before him was nothing more than a beaten soldier, continued to walk him through the desolate remains of the base. Morrison walked behind him, absorbing every detail, cataloging the systems, the surveillance, the layout of the facility. His mind was already running calculations. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to rebel in the traditional sense. Morrison knew the Zephyrians wouldn't expect what he was about to do. He had been trained to think strategically, to improvise in ways that no machine could predict, to turn the odds in his favor even when everything was stacked against him. The war had been lost, but the battle was far from over. He had learned long ago that when you can't win with force, you find a way to win with strategy. "Where are we going?" Morrison asked, his voice steady as he glanced at Crix, who was walking ahead. "You'll see," Crix replied dismissively, his back still turned as he continued to guide Morrison through the facility. Morrison nodded, taking in the details of his surroundings. He could see the remnants of human equipment, abandoned and untouched, their technology outdated by Zephyrian standards. It didn't matter, he had other ideas. There were systems here still running. Systems the Zephyrians used every day without a second thought. Those were the systems he needed to access. The pair arrived at a central control hub within the base, a simple room by the standards of Zephyrian architecture, yet sophisticated enough to manage the entire facility. The screens were alive with data, but it was the hum of power, the flow of information, that Morrison was interested in. The Zephyrians had built their empire on bureaucracy. The higher echelons of their control depended on perfect systems, and Morrison knew exactly how to exploit that. "Go ahead," Crix said as he entered the room, his tone still patronizing. "Take a look at what's left of your species' technology." Morrison's eyes flickered over the screen. He wasn't interested in the technology itself. He was interested in the infrastructure. The supply routes, the personnel data, the communication channels. He saw what Crix had missed, the intricate web of Zephyrian command, perfectly coordinated, designed for precision. And like any good system, it had its flaws, gaps that only someone from the outside could see. Crix stepped to the side, watching Morrison's every move with a smirk. But the smirk quickly faded as Morrison began typing at a terminal with quick, fluid movements. His fingers danced over the keys, and though the Zephyrian security system should have blocked him out, it didn't. Morrison was in. He had no intention of breaking the system down with brute force. Instead, he used the one advantage the humans still had, their creativity. Morrison's hands moved with purpose as he typed commands, altering the database, rewriting permissions. He wasn't just accessing information, he was changing it, bending it to his will. In moments, a message flashed across the screen: "Access granted. Command override enabled." Crix's eyes widened as the system began responding to Morrison's commands. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice rising with panic. Morrison didn't look up from the screen. "You think you're in control, don't you? You think your systems are invincible. But here's the thing about systems, Lieutenant. They can be managed." Crix's voice trembled with uncertainty now. You can't change anything. Your kind is finished." Morrison smiled, the first real smile he had shown since waking up. "Not yet." Crix moved to grab Morrison's shoulder, but the human was already ahead of him. In a blur of motion, Morrison reached out, tapping a series of keys on the screen and executing his plan. The screens in front of them flickered, displaying detailed supply routes, Imperial fleet movements, and most importantly, military assets. Morrison's eyes scanned the data, his mind racing. He had gained control over a network that the Zephyrians relied on for their entire operation. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was now a force in the very heart of the Empire's systems. "How long do you think you can hide behind your machines?" Morrison said quietly, his tone now cool and calm. "How long before your own systems betray you?" Crix's face twisted with rage, but Morrison could see the flicker of doubt in the Zephyrian's eyes. He was playing a dangerous game, but he knew the stakes. This was the beginning of something far bigger than any battle fought with weapons. The screens before Morrison began to change. Supply convoys were being redirected, military routes shifted. The chaos of it was beautiful, like a work of art. The Zephyrian Empire's perfectly ordered systems were starting to show cracks. "You're too late," Crix hissed. "You can't stop the Empire." Morrison turned to face him, his expression cold. "I'm not trying to stop the Empire, Lieutenant. I'm just getting started." The base's lights flickered, and for a brief moment everything went silent. A deep hum filled the room, signaling a shift. Morrison had triggered a subtle but catastrophic shift in the flow of information. The Empire's carefully laid plans were being unweaved, all from a single terminal. "What did you do?" Crix whispered, panic rising in his voice. "What have you done?" Morrison turned to leave, knowing this was only the first step. "I've made my move," he said, his voice firm. "Now let's see how you handle it." As he stepped away from the control room, Crix stood frozen, still in disbelief. The Zephyrians had always believed they could control everything. But they had never accounted for one thing: humanity's ability to adapt. They had underestimated what a single human soldier could do. They had underestimated the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy: creativity. It didn't take long for Commander Vex Talon to feel the stirrings of unease. The reports began trickling in, and with each one, his sense of certainty that everything was under control, that the victory over humanity was total, started to unravel. At first, it was a minor anomaly, a small disruption in a remote supply route. The Zephyrian command systems were unparalleled in their efficiency, so it seemed improbable that anything could have breached their security. But as the incidents began piling up, the evidence became undeniable. Something, or rather someone, was interfering with the smooth operation of the Empire's logistical systems. Vex sat in his command chair aboard the Dominator Prime, eyes narrowing as his officers reported on more disturbances. "Sir," Lieutenant Brix Corin said, his voice strained, "we've encountered multiple issues in the supply chain. Cargo shipments are being rerouted and some of our convoys are arriving empty." "Empty?" Vex's voice was icy, his irritation evident. "How do you explain that, Lieutenant?" Brix hesitated, his eyes scanning the data streams in front of him. "There's no explanation, sir. It's as if someone gained access to our systems and redirected our shipments. The convoy crews report no signs of battle, no damage to the vehicles, but the supplies are gone." The room grew tense. Vex's 4 eyes gleamed with a mixture of disbelief and growing frustration. "Impossible! There is no way a human could have done this." Yet the evidence was staring him in the face. The disruption was too precise, too well-organized to be random. This wasn't a random act of sabotage. It was something far more calculated. "We've identified the source of the breach," Brix continued, his voice taut with anxiety. It's coming from Earth." Vex felt his claws tense at the mention of the name. Earth, the homeworld of the defeated human race, the very planet where his fleet had wiped out the last remnants of human military power. "Send a team to investigate immediately," Vex ordered, his voice a low growl. "I want answers now." Back on Earth, Jake Morrison wasn't wasting any time. He had a plan, and it was coming together faster than even he had expected. The Zephyrians had underestimated him, thinking that the last human soldier was nothing more than an ancient relic. But Jake wasn't just a survivor. He was a strategist. And he had learned the most important lesson of all: it was never about fighting the enemy directly. It was about outsmarting them. Morrison had begun to systematically manipulate the Zephyrian logistics network. From the moment he gained access to their command systems, he had started making small changes. Supply convoys were rerouted. Resources meant for Zephyrian military forces were redirected to human survivor cells scattered across the galaxy. And all of it was done through their own bureaucratic channels. It was a game of paper, of data, of manipulation, and the Zephyrians had no idea they were even being played. He worked quietly, methodically, reaching out to surviving human factions hidden in various parts of the galaxy, using the very systems the Zephyrians had built to enforce their control. Morrison knew that by pulling the right strings, he could sow chaos in the Empire's carefully constructed order. And so he did. He smiled to himself as he read a report of a Zephyrian convoy that had just arrived at a human survivor base, only to find it completely empty. The supplies, which were meant for the occupying forces, had been reallocated to a human settlement. The Zephyrian soldiers, completely unprepared for such a move, had nothing to do but return empty-handed. "Perfect," Morrison muttered, his voice low but full of satisfaction. The human resistance was growing, spreading across sectors like a wildfire, and the Empire was none the wiser. But then the news came that changed everything. Vex's personal communicator blinked with an urgent signal. He pressed a button, and the face of his chief intelligence officer, Colonel Valak, appeared on the screen. "Commander, we've discovered something unsettling," Valak began, his expression serious. "Our intelligence division has identified the source of the disruptions. It's him, the human Jake Morrison." Vex's gaze hardened. "Morrison? But he's just a soldier. How could he be causing this much chaos?" Valak's voice was filled with barely contained frustration. "We've tracked him. He's managed to infiltrate our entire logistics network. Not just that, he's reprogrammed our command systems, redirected supply lines, and even gained access to high-level Imperial encryption. He's running circles around us, Commander. We need to deal with this immediately." Vex sat back in his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. We were too hasty, too confident in our victory. But how, Valak continued, clearly bewildered. How can one human, just one, be responsible for all of this? Vex's eyes flickered with a new understanding. Because we underestimated him, and now we're paying the price. Where is he now? Valak hesitated. He's still on Earth, we have him cornered, but we don't know how he's doing it. We've tracked his movements, but there's no trace of him physically. It's as if he's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Vex's expression darkened. Then we'll flush him out, prepare the fleet. We're going to eliminate this problem once and for all. Jake Morrison, however, was not worried. He had anticipated this move. The Zephyrians, in their arrogance, had thought they could contain him. But Morrison wasn't just using their systems to disrupt them. He was learning, adapting. The Zephyrians had no idea how far they had already fallen into his trap. He had scattered his influence throughout their command structure, manipulated their logistical channels, and now, as Vex prepared to strike, Morrison had one final card to play. By the time the Zephyrian fleet reached Earth, Morrison would already be gone. But what they wouldn't realize until it was too late was that he wouldn't need to be there. He had already begun to plant the seeds for a rebellion, one that would grow faster than the Zephyrians could stamp it out. As Vex prepared to launch a full-scale attack on Earth, the final pieces of Morrison's plan fell into place. The Zephyrian Empire was about to discover what it meant to be outsmarted, and this time they wouldn't have the luxury of victory. Jake Morrison wasn't just a soldier. He was a revolution waiting to happen, and the Empire had no idea what was coming. Jake Morrison stood in the shadows, watching as the Zephyrian fleet assembled in the distance. They were coming. They were angry, confused, and determined to finally stamp out the last human resistance. But what they didn't know was that their every move had already been anticipated. He didn't need to be on Earth to strike a blow to the Empire. He had already done that. From the moment he infiltrated their systems, rerouted their supplies, and manipulated their command structure, Morrison had set in motion a chain reaction that would be impossible for the Zephyrians to control. The Zephyrian Empire was built on precision, order, and technology. But Jake understood something the Empire didn't. There was no such thing as total control. There were always gaps, always weaknesses, and humanity had an uncanny ability to exploit them. He sat alone in a dimly lit room, the soft glow of a terminal in front of him casting light on his face. The quiet hum of the base's systems was a constant presence, but inside his mind, it was anything but quiet. He had been working relentlessly, not just to disrupt Zephyrian supply chains or to redirect their resources, but to build something bigger. The human resistance wasn't just a ragtag group of survivors. It had evolved. It was now a network, connected through stolen Zephyrian communication channels, coordinating in ways that were invisible to the Empire's sensors. Jake had created that network. He had gathered human survivors, some from colonies long abandoned, others from occupied worlds, and had connected them, unified them with a single goal: resist, adapt, and overcome. The Zephyrian Empire was vast, but it wasn't infallible, and the resistance had just begun to rise. On the screens in front of him, a series of encrypted messages flashed by. They were from various human cells spread across the galaxy. Each message carried a sense of urgency, a need for action. Supplies were being redistributed, prisoners were being freed, and in some sectors, Zephyrian outposts were already under siege. Morrison allowed himself a brief smile. His actions were creating ripples, and those ripples were turning into waves. The Zephyrians didn't understand the magnitude of the shift happening across the galaxy. They thought they had quashed humanity, but they hadn't. They had only awakened a force they couldn't possibly comprehend. The plan was simple, but it required patience. The time for open rebellion wasn't yet ripe. Humanity had been brought to its knees, and it would rise again, but not by charging headlong into battle. This time, the fight would be fought in the shadows, in the systems, in the bureaucracy. What the Zephyrians didn't realize was that their perfect control was its own undoing. The bureaucracy that had allowed them to dominate the galaxy was now a tool for resistance. And Jake Morrison had learned how to wield it. Back aboard the Dominator Prime, Commander Vex Talon paced furiously. The reports of continued disruptions were driving him to the edge of reason. Every time they thought they had solved the problem, another anomaly would appear. Another convoy would go missing. Another system would fail. Another supply route would be redirected. "Commander, there's something you need to see." Lieutenant Brix Corin said, entering the room with a data pad in hand. Vex turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. What now? Brix handed him the data pad, his expression tense. It's from Earth. We've traced the source of the disturbances. It's him, Jake Morrison. Vex's face contorted with disbelief. Morrison? But how? I thought we destroyed every last human military asset. Brix nodded grimly. We did, but Morrison is doing something we never expected. He's not fighting us directly. He's manipulating our systems, using our own bureaucracy against us. Vex's mind raced. Bureaucracy, how could he? Brix continued. He's learned to exploit our command infrastructure, our supply chains, our communications. Every time we think we're in control, he's right there, shifting everything. He's even managed to gain access to our higher security protocols. Vex felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a small rebellion or a few rogue humans disrupting their operations. This was something much larger, much more insidious. How many sectors are affected? Vex demanded. Brix flicked through the data pad. All of them, the whole galaxy. Our communications are being compromised, our fleets are getting diverted, and our supply routes are being systematically drained. The human resistance is growing, and it's using our systems to do it. Vex slammed his fist against the console in frustration. What is he after? Why doesn't he just attack us? Brix hesitated. That's the thing, sir. He's not trying to attack. He's trying to disrupt us. He's turning our own systems against us, making us inefficient. It's like he's trying to bleed us dry without us ever realizing it. Vex's claws clicked against the surface of the console. His mind raced. Morrison wasn't just surviving. He was strategizing, planning something far more dangerous than anything they had anticipated. Get me every high-ranking officer, Vex ordered, his voice cold with determination. We need to stop him now. We cannot let one human undo everything we've worked for. Jake Morrison was well aware of the Zephyrians' response. The Empire had no idea how much damage he had already caused. But he wasn't done yet. His plan was set in motion, and now he just needed to apply the final push. In the darkness of the control room, Morrison's fingers hovered over the terminal once again. He had just gained access to a higher level of the Empire's command center. The most important level, the one that controlled the military assets, the supply chains, the fleets. The one that Vex and his officers used to make their most crucial decisions. Morrison knew that with this access he could paralyze the Empire. He could tie their hands, force them into a corner. He could turn the tides for humanity. But he had to move carefully. He couldn't risk being caught. The moment the Zephyrians realized what he was doing, they would strike back with everything they had. But Morrison wasn't afraid. He was ready. Galaxy had changed. In the past cycles, the Zephyrian Empire had stood unchallenged at the center of the known universe. Its flawless mechanical precision in warfare and control had been its greatest strength. It had crushed humanity, forced entire species into submission, and maintained a ruthless grip on every star system under its dominion. But now it was crumbling from the inside out, and the force responsible was not a fleet of warships, nor a galaxy-spanning military campaign. It was one human, Jake Morrison. Commander Vex Talon sat in the war room of the Dominator Prime, his mind running at a pace that his normally calm exterior could not conceal. His once unshakable confidence had given way to a growing panic, one that he could not hide from his officers. The tactical displays in front of him blinked with flashing red alerts, the data almost incomprehensible in its volume. Reports from every corner of the Empire had poured in. Morrison had succeeded. The human had infiltrated every layer of their bureaucracy, manipulated their communication systems, and even taken control of several key Zephyrian fleets. It was as if their entire empire was spiraling out of control, all because of a single human soldier who refused to stay down. Lieutenant Brix, give me the status, Vex demanded, his voice tense. Brix's eyes flicked across the display, his expression tightening. Sir, we've lost contact with 4 of our fleets. Convoys are still being rerouted without explanation, and entire sectors have fallen into disorder. Even now, human cells across the galaxy are coordinating strikes, not through military force, but through our own communications networks. They've spread their influence to every species we've conquered. The Empire is falling apart. Vex's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. How is this possible? Morrison's just one man, one human. Brix met his eyes, his voice low. It's not just him anymore. He's inspired something much bigger than any one person. We're dealing with a movement. The very foundation of our empire, our bureaucracy, has become their weapon. Vex had always prided himself on the Zephyrian Empire's dominance, its absolute order and structure. But now, those same systems were being used against them. The more Vex tried to stop the disruptions, the more Morrison adapted. The Empire's vast, interconnected machinery was unraveling faster than they could patch it up. And it wasn't just the humans who had rallied around him anymore. The very species that had once bowed to the Zephyrians were now questioning their allegiance, following the lead of Morrison's message of unity and resistance. "Send for General Vaughn," Vex ordered, his voice edged with urgency. "We need to discuss our next steps." Within moments, General Vaughn appeared on the main screen, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of uncertainty. "Commander, the situation is worse than we thought. Morrison is everywhere. Our fleets are out of position, and human resistance cells are spreading faster than we can contain them." Vex closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The scale of the collapse was now undeniable. Morrison had played them perfectly. What started as a series of small disruptions had grown into a full-blown insurgency, one that had spread across the galaxy faster than any military force could have anticipated. "We can't let this continue," Vaughn said, his voice sharp. "We need to strike back decisively. We've waited too long. We must eliminate Morrison and the entire resistance before they organize further." Vex nodded, but there was hesitation in his movements. He had long prided himself on his strategic brilliance, but now he was out of his depth. He realized the impossible truth. Morrison was outsmarting them at every turn. They were playing his game now, and the Empire had no idea how to win. The silence in the war room stretched as the officers exchanged looks. It was clear. They needed something more. They needed to understand how to outmaneuver Morrison in a way that wouldn't just involve more firepower. But what could they do? The human was systematically dismantling the Empire's power from within, and every move they made only seemed to push him further into the shadows. At that moment, a low hum filled the room, the soft, unmistakable sound of a transmission. It was a single encrypted message directed straight to Vex's console. His heart skipped a beat. It was from Morrison. Vex's voice was steady, despite the thudding in his chest. "Put it through." The screen flickered for a moment before Jake Morrison's face appeared, calm, collected, and maddeningly composed. He wore no uniform, no military insignia, just the calm confidence of a man who had already won. The message was simple, yet cutting. "Commander Talon," Morrison's voice was like cold steel, yet it carried an undercurrent of amusement. "I have to admit you put up a good fight, but I'm afraid it's over. The human resistance has already spread too far. The people you conquered, they've realized something. They've seen what you've done to humanity, and now they're seeing the truth. Your empire isn't built on order, it's built on fear, and that fear is ending." Vex felt his grip tighten around the arms of his chair. "What do you want, human?" Morrison leaned forward slightly, his voice soft, yet carrying the weight of finality. "I don't want anything, Commander. I'm just here to make sure we all follow the proper protocols. After all, that's how you built your empire, right? On order, on bureaucracy. Well, now it's time to show you how a real system works. A system where everyone, humans, Zephyrians, Andromedans, Altarians, works together for the greater good. I've already set the wheels in motion. The galaxy is changing, and it's changing because we're all choosing to be better. The war, it's already over." Vex's fury burned as he heard Morrison's calm, almost cheerful tone. His empire was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The message ended with a single, crushing line. "See you soon, Commander. Don't worry. I'll be bringing the paperwork." Vex stood, his mind racing. He couldn't just let Morrison win. The galaxy had to be brought back into order. But how could they fight back against a revolution that wasn't fueled by guns and explosions, but by bureaucracy? A revolution that used their own systems, their own strengths against them. In that moment, something in Vex broke. He had underestimated humanity. He had underestimated Jake Morrison. And now, the final battle was no longer going to be fought in the stars. It was going to be fought in the very systems that had allowed the Empire to grow so strong. On the other side of the galaxy, Jake Morrison stood before a display of the galaxy's stars, his eyes reflecting the light of distant systems. He knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew that the Zephyrians could not stop the tide of change that was coming. What they hadn't understood was that humans didn't win through brute force. Humans won through adaptability, through the power of community, through working together. In the end, the empire had built its might on the belief that it could never be undone. It had relied on its systems to maintain order. But Morrison had shown them the truth. In the end, even the most powerful empires fell when their systems betrayed them. And now, as Morrison's final plans took shape, the galaxy would see what it looked like when humanity, against all odds, turned the tide. The victory would not be one of force, it would be one of unity, and it would begin with the most powerful weapon of all, paperwork.